Today, we're going to be talking about strategic cybersecurity for small and mid-sized businesses. And we have a special guest who is also a faculty member and thought leader, Hiram Machado. Hiram, welcome to the webinar.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me here.
Okay. Let's see, MJ, next slide, please, and tell you a little bit about Hiram. Hiram has been associated with the community over a decade now, and Hiram is the founder and CEO of a cybersecurity firm in the Seattle area in Bellevue, in the shadows of Microsoft, I'll say, as he's a Microsoft Gold partner, called AdaQuest. And they focus on IT infrastructure planning, strategy execution, but also cybersecurity for small to mid-sized businesses. And Hiram goes back quite a ways in founding the company 13 years ago. He also is a professor at the University of Washington, which has an amazing computer science IT program in security. And so we have not only a Gravitas faculty member, but also a University of Washington faculty member today. With that, Hiram, why don't you go ahead and lead us off? And what we'll do format-wise is we'll have you bring your slides up, share, and then we'll have a conversation. Coaches, feel free, and audience, feel free to pop in the chat if you have a question. I'll be monitoring chat. And then, of course, I will barge in a few times, Hiram, with a few questions so we make this a conversation. Over to you, Hiram.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Keith. I appreciate the introduction. I am going ahead and going to share my screen here. Give me 1 second, share screen. Yes, and let me make sure that I get the right screen here. And I hope everybody can see now a slide written, Strategic Cybersecurity for Small Business, Mid-Sized Business.
We see it, it's up.
Fantastic. Okay, everybody, it's a small group, so we can make this very interactive. Feel free to ask questions anytime or type in the chat, whichever works best for you. I'm based in Seattle, right next to Microsoft over here. I am originally from Brazil, born and raised in Rio de Janeiro, moved to US about 20-something years ago. And very happy to support small and mid-sized business in this and work with small mid-sized business in the cybersecurity space. It's something that I feel is important, is growing in importance more and more, and not everybody is prepared for it and to take care of their cybersecurity needs and requirements. In fact, even large organizations sometimes don't feel as prepared, and they face a major problem now with professionals. There isn't enough professionals out there to help organizations. Imagine small and mid-sized business. So that's the reality that we're going to talk through here today. I do want to though start with getting a better overview, if you will, of this digital transformation that's happening and why. What is that causing? What are the kind of the challenges that are addressed, right, with some of the technology that are out there? So the first question for you, and feel free to open up the microphone, is which one of these points resonate with you as a challenge that you and or your clients might face today? Feel free to open up the microphone and speak up. Business challenge is productivity, right? Is that a challenge that you usually face? Is communication, collaboration a challenge that you wanted to address? Is security compliance a concern, right? Or none of those are a concern today? So maybe who is there? And maybe Xavier, are those things that you see?
So productivity, definitely. Communication and collaboration, definitely. Security and compliance is not something I've heard very often, except with security companies. I mean, for small and mid-sized businesses.
Right.
For large businesses, it is different, but yeah.
Fantastic.
And Hiram, I'll add to, since our time when we prepared, I've been thinking about this and interacting with coaches. And one item that touches on security and compliance would be great for you to address too, is where does the accountability and the risk go up into and through the corporation? To
Sure.
what level of leadership? I know that we've talked about that in the past, and I think it's very important that those listening in understand the answer behind that.
Definitely we'll touch in that. And yes, so anybody else, does that resonate, or anybody else feel that is, Sarah, does that resonate with you?
I think that most companies, right, they're focused on the productivity of their team and the communication and collaboration, and they forget about that security and compliance, when really that should be their key focus, especially as now they're adding on more software for that productivity and communication.
Exactly, Sarah. Yeah. Yes, they often forget about it until something happens, right? And
that's
then
exactly right.
Then it's at the forefront of everything, right?
Then everything else goes away, and that is the key focus.
And that is the key, right?
We've all been there.
Exactly, it skips the whole line, go from the back of the line straight to the
front,
straight to the front, right? So, so that's very common and very common. A lot of it has to do with sometimes lack of awareness of what's going on, of what's happening, right? And there is the former FBI director had a phrase that everybody, the security community tends to repeat it, which is, he used to say, there are two types of companies in America: the ones that have been hacked and the ones that don't know yet they have been hacked. And the reason for that is because an average intruder in a organization takes about 180 days in your organization before they act on something, right? So during that 180 days on average, that intruder is just collecting, intelligence about your environment, is trying to, sometimes they come in with, a user credential that is not, can't do much. So he stays there trying to navigate laterally, get a credential from someone who has more power inside that organization. And once he feels that he has what he needs, that's when he launches his attack or something. So it's very common. So you're right on in terms of that perspective. And often these are the, common issues to be addressed by small business and mid-sized business: productivity, communication, collaboration, and security, quite often. The reality of today is that technology is infused, has been infused in almost every single business across the globe, right? Every business, every service, every product, right, is going through some form of digital transformation, right? We need to rethink about how we deliver. We need to rethink about how we produce our products, right? How our customers interact with our products. And with that transformation, customer expectations are changing, right? And there are new digital business models that we need to think about. Now, think about, one that's very famous. Think about taxi driving, right? With Uber and Lyft and others nowadays. It's only about 20 years ago, or even less, 15 years ago, right? That wasn't even in the radar. Right now, and now it's mainstream, right? That's how fast digital transformation is happening, right? Often we don't even realize it. I don't know if you knew that the average company, the average enterprise, when they go into the stock market, when they launch in the stock market, in the past, they used to take on average 20 years to reach a $1 billion evaluation. It's the average of the S&P 500 to reach $1 billion evaluation. The last four software companies that went to the market, they reached 1 billion evaluation in 4 years. Right? That's WhatsApp and Snapchat. 4 years. Uber, if I'm not mistaken, is in the list. In 4 years, they reached $1 billion evaluation when the traditional companies took 20 years to do. Right? So that is just an indication of the importance of technology, right? To any organization. If you don't understand that technology is key for the success of your organization, you will be behind. It may take another year, may take another 5. I doubt you'll take another 10, right? Before you are behind, if you're not evolving with technology, understanding what's going on. Because companies that apply technology in a way, they tend to be more agile and innovative than others, right? They attract and retain talent better, right? They have an environment with this friction-free collaboration. It's much more dynamic, right? They have services that are attractive to their customers. All of that comes together, and technology is what enabled that. That doesn't take away the merit of the service in itself. That needs to be thought through, needs to be designed and delivered to the customer. But chances are that without technology, that product or service will be very soon outdated, right? And displaced from the marketplace. That is the reality, as we see this happening every day. If you go back to the Jim Collins books that we probably all know who that is, and the Good to Great book, I find it amazing that in 2000, he wrote the Good to Great book, and one of the companies he featured, and all of us here old enough to probably remember, he wrote about Circuit City in that book. He featured Circuit City as an example, right? What did Jim Collins do in that book? He looked at the past 20 years, right? He said, I'm going to look at 20 years, every company that outperformed the market for the past 20 years, right? And what did they do? And he collected the best practice of those companies and said, okay, these are the best practice for the next 20 years. If you want to be successful like they were, these are the best practices. Guess what? He was wrong. Okay, Circuit City 3 years later bankrupted, right? They were displaced from the market because a young guy that came in with this idea called Amazon.com. That wasn't the only reason for sure, but there was a big influencer. There was this young guy that was selling books on the internet that all of a sudden he decided to sell everything else on the internet, right? And Secret started to lose marketplace, and for other reasons too, right? 3 years later, they were bankrupted, right? So the point that I'm trying to make is, looking back the last 20 years is not an indication of what you have to do for the next 20, right? Or looking back the next 5 is not necessarily an indication of what you need to do for the next 5. So we really need to look forward, look back for some learnings, but don't take it for granted that if I look back and I see what people did well, that's what I'm going to do to succeed for the next whatever time frame. Things have changed, and things change that quickly. One last comment about this to illustrate, to highlight the speed of transformation. 3 years ago, 4 years ago, there was a study that said that 45% of the kids in kindergarten, that was like 3 or 4 years ago, 45% were, by the time they hit the job market, they were going to work in a job that didn't yet exist. Right? That's how quickly things are transforming. And I can only assume that for 45% of new jobs, there is a percentage of jobs that will disappear too, right? That won't exist because they disappear. But the main point is 45% of these young kids will work, we can't prepare them for the job that's gonna come that they're gonna have to do. They're gonna have to figure that out on their own. We can't prepare them. We can teach the basics. So these are points that I wanna make to illustrate it's important to think about technology. For every business, you cannot afford not to think about technology, not to make technology an element of your strategic plan, right? Any questions, right?
Hiram, just a comment as you transition. In looking back in the last 5 years, it's almost good to look back at companies, what not to do, to be complacent, as well as the disruptors, and see what they're doing. Learn from the disruptors, and also learn from those who didn't make it. So thank you.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. And unfortunately, there's a lot not making it, right? And the disruptors are there, and that's causing, in some ways, this is the beauty of technology, I think. right? The beauty of technology is, in some ways, it level the ground of competitive. In other ways, it makes that gap even bigger. The good thing about the part that I say it levels, right? Most everything that you can think of, right? It's much easier for a small business to do today than it used to be 20 years ago because of technology, right? From the simplest thing like you can go and publish your book, right? What enabled that to happen? Technology. Because or else we would be still in the same state we were 20 years ago, that we had to go through these public book publishing companies, right? And engage with them and let them now you can go, because of technology, you can go and publish a book. So technology is leveling the ground. You can, like a small business today, a good example is a small business today, they want to put their website up, right? They go to many different sites, they put their project there, people from all over the world come up, say, I can put your website together for this price and whatever. It's much easier, it's leveled. You want a server, right? You click 2 buttons, you have a server somewhere, and you can deliver service to that server. Whereas 20 years ago, we'd have to hire an IT guy, buy a computer, install it somewhere. No, now you click a few buttons and you have a server running to operate and deliver your business. So it leveled everybody. You don't need to be a big corporation to have that big server to be able to serve. So that's great. By other hand, if you're not in that state, if you're not concerned about that and using those technologies, the gap between those who are and you is much bigger. It just keeps on increasing if you're not going, but it's accessible. That's the good news. It's there, but has to be, thought through and have to be made part of your strategic planning. That's the message, right? So some of the talking about the challenge, technology will address a lot more than this, but some of the common areas that are addressed is on the productivity side, right? Today we're working from everywhere, so we need to provide an environment to work from everywhere. A young kid, a very dear friend of mine, his son is 20, is a bright 24 years old boy, bright, super intelligent. And there were several people wanted him to work for them, right? And he was the one telling, you know what, I want to travel around the globe, right? And I can do the job that I do for you from anywhere, right? And he took the job of whomever told him, yes, sure, here is a laptop. We know what you have to do, right? I don't care where you are. And that's what he did. He took off, he left, and he spent almost 2 years traveling around the globe, right? Working, right? From New Zealand, from India, from France, whatever. But the point here is that mobility, that's a requirement now, right? Of course, it's just one example of one little guy, but this is becoming the norm, right? That's my point. And we have to accept that, because the new generation, I can tell you for experience, they feel a lot more entitled than we used to be in our age. We just ask my son to stop the flute here, just a second.
And while Hiram's taking a break, everyone, part of what we did last year in April when we introduced the 7 attributes of agile growth.
Sorry,
we
it was my 4 years old.
No, that's okay. We added the systems attribute, and the systems attribute was added and is part of the 7 attributes, coaches and clients, because in that is both IT infrastructure planning, disruptive technology, and now we're layering in cybersecurity awareness and expertise through our thought leader, Hiram. And that was the genesis behind our webinar here. So Hiram, back over to you.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
I was saying that productivity. So we changed it's changing culturally every company, how people interact, how they go about interacting with each other, right? And you want efficiency. You have to gain efficiency, and that and it even helps with employee morale, right? On the communication side, it allows people to work together much more efficiently, right? And with a unified communication platform, right? That can work. Phone systems are moving from the old, model to digital platform. And then we have cybersecurity, phishing attacks that that are happening every day. It's still happening a lot. It's a lot more sophisticated today than it used to be 15, 20 years ago. And we need to, technology is one way of addressing a lot of that. So if you think about the IT environment, it used to be that just a firewall, a antivirus on your machine would be sufficient for addressing, cybersecurity. And time has changed. It's no longer sufficient. There's a lot more going on. What happens is, as more employees are working remotely, as more things are digital, you are expanding, right? As you become more digital, as a company, you expand the surface of attack, if you will, right? The more assets that you have in the digital world, that's your surface, right? And that becomes the surface of attack. More vectors of come in. We have employees accessing data of your company. And another point is, data is becoming more important, right? Technology companies today, and I believe it will be for the rest of our lives, as far as I can tell, and the way I think, is technology companies, they are becoming more powerful than oil companies, right? It's shifting. We are living history right now. We are living through that shift, right? 20 years ago, 30 years ago, I believe oil companies will be remembered as the mighty oil companies that one day existed, right? And technology companies will be the mighty large corporations, as they are already, large corporations. But we're still living through that shift, I believe, and the shift is going to, go all the way to the technology at some point, because we are developing technology, including to cleaner energy and all of that. Who's going to enable clean energy technology, right? So there is nothing will happen in the world without technology companies. What we need to do is to embrace technology and infuse technology in the services and products that we have, so we can be competitive, we can be lean, competitive, cost efficient, and attractive to our customers. So that's the reality. I have another question as we go through this. When it comes to cybersecurity, Xavier already mentioned, doesn't see it coming up very often. Sarah indicated it happens. You see it more often than not when something happens. That's when cybersecurity. But do you think these concerns resonate with business people, right? When it comes to cybersecurity, I don't have visibility if I may have been breached or not. Sometimes what drives that security concern is compliance or regulation, right? That they have to comply with. If you are in the medical industry, you have to comply with HIPAA, for example, right? Some of them have, concern about the cost of cybersecurity, or sometimes is what Sarah already mentioned. It's a recent cyber incident that happened that kind of caused you to be aware. Have you seen any of this, Sarah? Have you seen does that some or all of it resonates with you, or not really?
Yeah, I think the concern, right, that big concern, I don't know if I have been breached. So where you were talking about how a lot of those cyber criminals are just kind of waiting and watching what your organization is doing. You don't know if you've been breached until somebody else from the outside says, hey, I just got this weird email from you, right? So I think that it's not knowing what is kind of lurking out there and what those risks are. And then I was also, as you were speaking, I was thinking about some smaller organizations, right? And especially as they're transitioning to virtual, they want that employee morale, they want that interaction, they want to have that freedom of their employees to work how they're most productive. So they're not putting formal policies in place to help them with their cybersecurity, and they may not know how to create those policies or what to really be looking for in those systems to make sure that they're limiting their risk.
That is a very good point, Sarah, because it's an acting balance between security and and convenience, right? You want to make it as convenient as you possibly can, but you want to make it secure, right? One example, and I know we are in Zoom right now, and I hope China is not listening to us right now, but one of the challenges that were brought up to Zoom was that, and they may have fixed it already, was that it was easy to break in. The reason why it was easy to break in is because, and I'm using that just as an example of convenience versus security, right? So the example here is, they made it so that as a user, you can say, I'm going to create a link here, and I'm going to send this to anyone that I know on an email. And whomever has that link can just click here and get into my meeting. So you don't need to sign in, you don't need to enter password, you don't need to do anything. Just by having that link, you can come in. So what did hackers found? Said, oh, I understand now the algorithm, how they go about creating that key, right? For every individual meeting, right? Now hackers, they keep on just trying different meetings because they know the algorithm, how the algorithm creates the key, and just enter in any meeting that they want. And there had been stories of them hacking into, sometimes just to play around with, sometimes just to test things, but posting things that were not appropriate in the middle of the meeting, things like this. But the point is, the reason why they did it that way is because they were trying to maximize convenience, right? They want to make it as convenient to users to say, all we have to do is send this link and you're done, right? Anybody clicks and it's done. Great, but it caused a security issue. So you're right on when you say, what's the acting balance here between convenience and security? And technology, it will be a struggle for many years to come, right? I believe, to find that balance. But there are many ways of minimizing it and addressing that. But you're right, that's often a concern. And there is also a little bit of education that needs to take place. In fact, I'll talk a little bit about it at the end, but education needs to take place so people, they understand. It's the same analogy that I do when you go through the airport. Who complains about the security of the airport? It's important for you. Now, and how inconvenient is that? Right? It is inconvenient. Why can't I just walk through my airplane, board it, and be done with it, right? Why do I have to go through that security? But most people understand the reasons behind why those security are in place, and they, just go through it and say, sure, it is what it is. I need to go through this. So part of addressing that gap is education.
And Hiram, on that point too, as I talk to coaches and CEOs, some that I work with and then through coaches, there is a hidden concern, or maybe it's not hidden, but it's in the background, is how, as a CEO, owner, leadership team member, do I know that I have the right skill set on my IT team with the rapid changing of cybersecurity and compliance, et cetera? So cybersecurity and IT often is not the main thing. It's rising more quickly in the mindset of the CEO and the leader. But as you go address that concern within a CEO that doesn't always come forward, how do I know I have the right skills, staff, and relationships to stay out in front of this?
Right. Fantastic. Thank you for that, Keith. And that helps me also to, it's a reminder of, you mentioned it before, how the responsibility has been brought up to the level of CEO and even the board to start with, right? To start addressing that is, all of us, including the CEOs, need to think about this as just another major area of your organization. Every CEO must be concerned about their finances. I may not be a finance person, right? But as a CEO, I still need to look after, understand the language, know when my VP of finance is talking to me, what he's talking about. And by the same token, I need to be able to talk to my marketing salesperson. I need to be able to talk to my IT guys the same way. You need to have, as a CEO, as a leader of the organization, you need to have that basic understanding of what's going on in every area, right? So we can at least have an intelligent conversation with the people that are working for you. Of course, you don't need to be an expert like they are, right, in their particular function, but you have to understand enough of what's going on around you, around the globe, so you can have an intelligent conversation with the people who are responsible for it. The proof, if you will, that how the importance of cybersecurity and IT in general has risen to the level of the board. Look at who is at the Senate responding when something happens, when Target was breached, right? Who had to respond for it? It went all the way to the board. The board is accountable for it. If somebody down there did not did not put the configurations in the right place, or if they were irresponsible in taking care of the configuration, guess who's going to suffer the consequence? The board, right? They were the ones asked. And what they want to know often from the board, right? Did you ask the right questions to your people? They're not expecting them to know if they set up a piece of software to protect or not. They want to know, are you managing this? Are you addressing it in your organization? Have you taken the steps to see? Because here is the thing, there is no 100% secure. Nothing's 100% secure. We have a unfortunate example of this right now on January 6th with people storming to the Capitol, right? Nothing is 100% secure. People rob banks. Nothing's 100% secure. They will infiltrate. Most large organizations that have been infiltrated, it's not that they have nothing. Most of them have done things, have put things in place. The challenge is things evolve. It's a live thing that's happening, and you have to be on top of it. So it is indeed a lack of security professionals today in the market, right? So the important thing is for the CEOs to understand from a high level, from a high perspective, be able to have a conversation with their IT and say, do you understand the issues of cybersecurity? Are you addressing these issues? And I'll give some pointers here in a second to at least organize those areas of concern, so you can ask intelligent questions about, have you addressed this? Have you addressed this? Have you addressed this? Maybe the answer in terms of, if they get into the nitty-gritty of the answer, you may not know it, and you don't have to, right? But if they're confident about their answers, if they say, oh yes, this is what I did, this is what I did, even if you don't understand what they're saying, at least you know it has been thought through, right? And there had been something in place that, to help us protect, with the understanding that nothing is 100% secure. So let's continue here. So the challenge today is this growing landscape, right, of digital state, right, that's becoming more and more attractive to bad actors, to people who want to cause harm, right? And then when it comes to professionals, the solutions are complex, right? There's too many solutions for cybersecurity, right? Average company, average large organization buys about 65 different products from 35 different companies just to compose the portfolio of security for their infrastructure, right? Everything, you think there are, antivirus, email protection, firewall, and when you add that all up, these large organizations is 65 different products to compose. It's complex. It's not easy, right? So of course the scale comes down as you come down to small business, right? but still, that example just illustrate the level of complexity, right? And those solutions are sometimes, mounting costs. You never know where to invest. Do I put my money on an email protection, or do I upgrade my firewall? Those are, what do I want to do? Often it has to do with understanding, your assets, right? It's understanding what you have inside, right? Going back to the analogy with a bank and a house, why don't we have a guard with a dog in front of our houses? Right? Why don't we hire one and put it there? Because we're trying to find a balance between, the risk the real risk that exists, the value of your assets, right? And what's worth investing, right? So maybe most of us would think, okay, the risk is low. If I look at the value of my assets, maybe a good door with a good lock is probably good enough, right? For most people. If I'm a bank, well, then I want a guard there. So you see how there is a need to look at alignment between, what kind of protection do I need to have versus, nothing is preventing me from having a guy armed with a dog in front of my house. There's nothing preventing me from having that. If I want to hire one, is it worth it? Is it what I should do? Probably not. I should invest on something else if I want to protect my house, because that's not what's going to, for me, that's not what's going to solve my problem. For a bank, yes, that's what's going to solve the risk. So part of it is to make that alignment between cost versus asset value, right? And the asset value, have to think from the standpoint of the attacker, not from yours, right? It's not what it value to you, it's what it value to whomever might get a hold of that of that asset, right? And it depends on every organization, will be different. How many, customer information you have, what kind of customer information you have, right? If they hack me, how much is compromised of those customer information? That's why Target and some other organizations were at the, in Washington, answering questions why they have been breached, because the level of people that have been compromised is too great. And they want to know, have you done your homework? And if they can prove it, if they say, yes, this is what we have done, and yet I have been breached, then most, organizations trying to scrutinize you say, well, that happens. The same way that if a bank is robbed, they say, did you take care of it? Did you have a security guy in front of the door? Did you do this? Did you have a safe? Yes, I had all of that, and yet I was robbed. Okay, so then we can't hold you accountable or liable for it because you had done your homework. That's what most, that's the way we should think. We need to do our homework, we need to do our job, and let, so if they come after us one day.
Haran, can I ask you a question?
Yes, please.
So coming back to your point, when you take an average mid-sized company, what are these assets that are most valuable in the eyes of the attacker and that they should protect first?
Sure. Assets that are valuable. And I can't really list everything, but I'll just give some examples. It's too many. But usernames and passwords, one of the most valuable, right? Because what happens today is when they get a hold of a username and password, what they start doing is to say, okay, I got this person with this username, I know this password. What if I go to Bank of America site with this username and this password? There's a very good chance that people use the same password everywhere and the same username, right? And the same email account. So once they get that list, they're free to explore, right? So there is a black market for that. There is a black web, right? A black market web where often the people who do that are not the same people who stole it in the first place, right? People, when they steal it, they go to the black market and say, hey guys, I got here a database with 1,000 names, 2,000, however many, right? Who wants it, right? Give me $100,000, give me $1,000 or whatever. give me $2,000 and here is a database. Go. Those guys that buys those are usually the ones trying to sneak in. And then you go to the traditional website. If it's an American, list, well, Bank of America and Starbucks, right? Those are typical organizations. They expect most people to have an account with and try it out. And if they get into your Bank of America, now they can they can infiltrate. So username and password are the most sought kind of user assets. But then you have bank account, right? That people are trying to look for information. Then you have social engineering, just trying to understand who you are, what you do, because that way they can launch an attack on you and you don't realize it, right? So when I say that people stays for for 180 days in the organization, often they are doing social engineering. So they're trying to understand who is who in the organization, who is the CEO. The CEO communicates with this person and he talks this way. They are getting so sophisticated that this happened to one of our now client before. They're getting so sophisticated that the CEO was traveling in our airplane, right? And at that moment, one of his admin person receives an email saying, I'm getting to the airplane right now. This is urgent. I need to make this wire transfer to this account here, blah, blah, blah. Please do it now, right? And the attacker knows at that point that the CEO is in the airplane. He can't answer. He knows that. She knows it. So as a person who receives that information, look at how many clues you have to believe that that's true. You already know that he's traveling, right? He's telling you, I'm traveling. You know that's true. He's telling you, I'm in an airplane. You know that's true. So therefore, this must be a legitimate request. And I need to act now before he lands on the other place, whatever he's going to. So when they are in, they're looking to that kind of information to see how they can perpetrate their attack. But email addresses, address of users, any PII data primarily, right? Because PII data, I don't know if you heard that term before, is personal identifiable information, right? Anything that's personal identifiable information, social security numbers, email, because now I can go to social security website. As it had happened, they attacked social security websites, and usually they have like the second factor of authentication. Oh, tell me your address, tell me something. So the more information they have about you, the more they can pass through those checkpoints, right? To validate that they are you, even though they aren't. So what they did in the last year, there was a lot of, they went to the IRS, they filed unemployment in the IRS on behalf of some people. The IRS issued a check, but there is a delay between the time they get a check and the time that the person realized that happened, right? So they usually they were able to get at least one or two checks from the IRS before the person realized that she's receiving, quote unquote, unemployment, even though she's working, right? Because there is the checkpoint, that's right. The IRS send a check and then they go send to the organization who in principle fired that person to validate. But by the time they do that, one check at least has already gone, and that's how they collect a bunch of checks. And how they collect that? By knowing your personal information. Last number of social securities that's the dangers. The dangers are when they can't put this all together. If they only get your social security, they can't do as much. Right? If that's all that they get. If they only get your name, they can't do as much. If they only get addresses, they can't do as much. But when they get the combination of, then they can do it all. They can impersonate you in so many different ways. Make sense? Did I answer a question, Xavier?
Hiram, one common misconception is that these attacks are pointed almost exclusively at the larger enterprises, Target and so on. And you and I had a dialogue last month about the target-rich environment small and mid-sized companies are from these cyber criminals. Talk about that a little bit as you transition into.
In fact, the screen talks about it, in fact, because Verizon report shows that 58% of the breach happens in small business. The thing is, the reality is they don't make the news, right? The small business has been attacked, don't make the news. You hear about the big guys, you hear how Target and Nordstrom and whomever suffer a breach. You don't hear about those small business, but 58% of the attackers attacked a small business. The average cost for that small business was $120,000. And there is another study that I don't have here that shows that, I forgot the percentage, I think it's 40%, don't quote me on that, but about 40% of the small business that suffer a major attack, they are out of business in 6 months. They can't handle a major attack, right? They just, because if it was too much money transferred, right? If something really happened, they can't survive a major attack. So it's a serious thing, right? And talking about personnel to deal with, 62% of the people don't have the personnel in-house to do it. So ideally, you want to count on products and technology that support your organization that doesn't require as much. And here is just some examples. Now, someone was fooled by email from the CEO, as I have mentioned before. There is ransomware. They encrypt all of your files, right? If they get, and Xavier, to answer your question, one of the most sought username and password combination they want to is the administrator of your system, right? If they compromise the account of that administrator, they can now go into the system and do anything that they want. And often what they do is encrypt your files and ask for ransomware to release the files back to you. And there is very little that you can do at that point, right? Because they had the key of the kingdom. That administrator is has the key of the kingdom when it comes to your IT system, right? So there is plenty of example. These slides, I'll send it to you. So in wrapping up a little bit here, getting close to wrap up, and I want to get to this point. Advanced security posture. Today, you need to think about defense, protection, and secure your devices, because there are so many devices out there. The way to break this down, and when you're a CEO, when you're somebody trying to understand the posture and the elements of your cybersecurity defense, you want to think with these pillars in mind. The question is, what have we done what we have in place that will help us identify that we are under attack, right? That's the first thing, right? And what we have in place that helps us protect against cyber attacks, or inside even attacks, right? Then, number one is identify what, I meant to say, identify what I have to protect, right? Can we identify, do we know what we have to protect, right? Do we protect it? Is it protected, right? Even though now I know it's protected, what are the capabilities that we have to detect in case that protection doesn't work, right? So how do we detect that we are breached? Then you ask, if you can detect, how do we respond to it? Do we have processes in place? Do we have the technology to respond to an attack should that happen, right? And finally, the last question is, and if everything fails, do you have a recovery plan, right? If you are attacked by ransomware, as an example, what's the recovery plan that we have in place? So those are elements of and how you want to think about security. If you have good answers for those pillars from your IT, you're probably doing okay, right? And again, the IT doesn't need to be a seasoned security professional, but he needs to understand this language, right? And he needs to know that he had done his homework to address each one of these areas when it comes to your cybersecurity, right? And being able to answer this goes a long way with any, if you're scrutinized, if you have to answer for a breach, being able to elaborate on this will go a long way. And that's what, from an executive level, you need to be able to elaborate on, knowing that you have taken care of those elements when it comes to your IT infrastructure. Did I make sense? to all of you. Yeah.
Very much. Hiram, let me ask a question on this. So there will be CEOs and coaches listening in asking, okay, where do we start? So let's say I'm a mid-market CEO and I've got a $20 million company. I've got a small IT staff, business is going well, but I really am flying fairly blind on cybersecurity. I believe we have measures in place, et cetera. But what is the first step in knowing where I am? And then typically, what does the path look like to get to an ongoing situation where I can sleep at night and be pretty darn confident that I can identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover?
Right. Fantastic. Yeah. So first of all, you need to start asking these questions to yourself and see if you have a clear answer to these questions, right? So there's a good chance that most mid-size, small and mid-sized business won't have a very good answer to this right away, right up front, right? He may have to check with their IT, he may have to understand, but at least this gives him or her the language to go and check with their IT, right? Have you done this stuff? And if the IT can't answer, that's a good way to we need to think about this then. How do we now, launch a program that we can do? So it starts with identifying your assets. If you can't answer that, that's the first point, because everything else depends on what are my assets, right? I don't have, bars of gold in my home, but if I had, I probably have a different security perspective of how to secure my house. So first you need to understand what are you dealing with in terms of assets, in terms of importance. Another thing to answer Xavier is user data is, there is insight rate, there is, IP, that they're looking for. There is espionage from other companies, in a bigger scale. Which kind of assets do I have an IP that I wanted to protect that I don't want anybody else to have access to? Am I developing a product that cannot, the spec, the information about that product cannot go to the market, it cannot get out there because otherwise it will, interfere with my ability to be successful with that product. So what do you have? Do I collect data from my clients, PII data, or do I don't? Right? Do I need to comply with certain regulations such as HIPAA, right? Or do I not? So the first is identify your assets and what you have to reply with. And then you move through that, right? Like, okay, now that I know my assets, for those assets, what the right protection level for those assets, right? And what the right detection, infrastructure that I want to have in place. So an assessment is probably a good way to start, to have a full understanding of your assets, what you have, right? And that, I used to say that assessment takes the picture of today, right? Then with coaching, with some direction, let's build up your tomorrow. Let's put a vision to the tomorrow. Oh, I understand those are my assets, right? Do I have bar of golds at home or do I not? What do I have? Do I have expensive things or do I not? If you do, right? Where do you want to be? What's your plan here? What's the vision? The vision is to protect these type of assets, and you need to think about it because you can't apply the same protection for everything, right? If you could, we don't have different, layers of protection everywhere. We have to apply the right level because you don't want to spend more money than what you should either. So first is understand. So I would say start with an assessment of and identification of your assets, and then move through a strategic plan by developing the strategy for each one of those pillars, right? Understanding which tools, which technology are we going to apply for each one of those pillars. Of course, at that point, you have to count on your IT person to do his homework, to do his research, and to make you feel safe. It's his responsibility to make you as a CEO to feel, I may not understand all the details of what you're saying, but I get it, and I'm comfortable. Make sense?
One other comment, then over to you, Xavier. As a fellow CEOs, to those listening in, Hiram is talking about the tangible intangibles. Don't forget, there's also the risk management of insurance coverage. We're seeing more cybersecurity insurance available through your general policy, business protection, and then also training of employees, screening and training who comes onto your team and how you keep them knowledgeable to look for threats as well as identify threats. Hiram, anything to add on either of those areas?
Yeah, no, I think that you touched on the insurance part, and one good thing to do as a strategic coach is make sure that every business owner that you are coaching, that they take a look at their current cybersecurity or internet. Often they have some, and they believe they may be covered, but more often than not, they're not as covered as they think they are. Right? When it comes to digital crimes. So we have to have a conversation with whomever the broker of their insurance is and ask the question to the broker, how protected am I when it comes to digital crimes, right? And what kind of protection do I have? Often they'll have some minimal language there that doesn't quite provide you the protection that you might, need or might be appropriate for you. So understanding which language they have and having that discussion with your agency is a good, the insurance agency is a good thing to do as well. Is important. And
Xavier, I interrupted you. I'm sorry. Go ahead with your question.
Oh, sorry. So I just wanted to come back to Keith's question. Imagine a CEO of a standard, regular mid-sized company. They don't have time or money to do this whole assessment and vision and strategy, but they can do one thing. They can just take one initiative to improve on their cybersecurity. Which one initiative should they take?
Okay, that's a very good question, Xavier. And my humble answer is he can't. My humble answer is cybersecurity in an organization is a journey. It's not a one thing. You can't have anything with one thing. Now, what you can do is to start the journey. And you just mentioned he doesn't have time. Yes, and that's very true and realistic to think for a lot of the business leaders out there. Yet we as coaches, we tell them, but at some point you have to stop and do your strategic plan. You have to stop and put the people together. That is your marketing person, that is your sales person, that is your operations person. You have to stop and think, how are we going to operate? That cybersecurity just become one element of that conversation. It's important to have that in the element of that conversation that should already be taking place and be part of the rhythm. We can't solve much with that one thing. It has to be a journey. You need to understand where you are today and start the journey from that point and just incrementally get better over time. And I say that incrementally because I understand we can't embrace the word at once. We can't do everything that probably needs to be done at once, right? But we can, step by step, start in that journey. Understand the priorities. So the conversation is, where are we, right? What are the gaps? And yes, once you understand, you do the assessment, understand where we are and what are the gaps, now you can think about that one thing, because that one thing will be different for every business owner.
Hey, Hiram, a comment and a question here too, something you've taught me a month ago. So Xavier and those listening in, we're working under the systems attribute on developing the content from Hiram to train us as coaches and to work with our CEOs, not to do a deep assessment, to ask those questions. And Hiram and I have started that journey earlier this week on what we need to be asking and facilitating as part of the strategic planning is the point. Now, Hiram, I want to challenge you a little bit because you taught me well a month ago. Talk about system administration, two-factor authentication.
That's right. There you go. Yes.
Okay.
There you go. Okay. I will accept that because you did remember well our conversation. Mm-hmm. So I mentioned earlier on that the administrator, right, of your organ, the global admin, usually how they refer to it, has the key of the kingdom, right? If anybody takes possession of that username and account together, he can do whatever. That's usually when ransomware happens, usually. So one thing that can be done, and that's, you're right, Keith, that I usually say, if there is one thing that you need to do this, Xavier. So there is one thing, is protect that account with what they call multi-factor authentication. Anybody in your organization who has a global admin account, right, must be protected with multi-factor. What that means is entering my password is not enough. right? You have to have a second factor authentication. So if I am an administrator of my system, I'll enter my password, and maybe there are different ways of going about it, and most systems will allow one way or another, is to say, I enter my password and I receive a text message with a code that I need to enter, right? Or I enter my password, and can be anything, and I receive a call in my phone, so I can enter. Or I enter my password and I have to have a key that I plug in my laptop so I can enter. There are different ways of going, but that's what a second factor authentication means, right? Your username and password cannot be enough for someone to enter, because that's too easily. It's easy to rack, and there's a good chance, there's a very good chance that your administrator went to a Target, went to a whatever, Nordstrom, whatever, and for convenience, create an account there. I have done it. Who hasn't, right? I create an account there. I put my company email, because I know I'll remember that, and I put the same password that I use in my corporate account, because it's going to be easier to remember, and that's what stays there. So if that Target is, and that's another thing that they do, when they breach into Target or whatever, I'm just using Target as an example, but when they breach, they often look at this, oh, this is a corporate account, right? This is Iram at AdaQuest, and this is password for Target. Let's try on his system and see if that works on his system. And if I'm a global admin, he can do whatever he wants, right? So if there is one thing I would say, activate MFA. It's referred to as an MFA, multi-factor authentication, for every global admin that you have in your organization.
Okay, Hiram, let's begin to close here in the next few minutes. And
last
everyone, we'll be doing a part 2 in the future too. We haven't scheduled that yet, but we'll be doing more depth and width on cybersecurity and IT with Hiram. But go ahead, Hiram.
I'll just close up in about a minute or so. When you think about strategic, using technology strategically, there are some good reasons for using technology, right? In some ways to think strategically about it is, can we consolidate vendor cost when technology? I mentioned that can be a big problem, right? So we can reduce the total cost of, of our risk. Technology can allow you to reduce travel cost all over, right? For meetings, for what we are doing right now. You can automate processes with technology, right? Often it's an advantage for a company to move from CAPEX to OPEX when they think about their on-premise environment versus their cloud environment. When they migrate to the cloud, they move from CAPEX to OPEX, and most organizations appreciate that, because I don't have to deal with that depreciation thing of machines and all of that. I just go to a pure cost, and that's it. So there are some good reasons for doing that. To wrap up, what we are offering here is, we can do a security assessment for your organization. And for organizations of a certain size, if they, I can get, potentially I can get a sponsorship from Microsoft to do it. So it can be done without any cost to the organization, right? It's a quick cybersecurity that will provide a report like this, right? That there's a lot more than just that. That's just the high level of the report, with a little bit of understanding of your security profile, supportability to new technology, usage optimization, what can be done, and we provide like insights into each one of those areas for the organization. That can be a start point, and for most organizations, we can do that at no cost to the organization.
And Hiram, let's dwell on this point just a moment as we wrap up. So Microsoft, you are a gold certified partner with Microsoft. So Microsoft is coming alongside, they're studying the market, and through your relationship with Microsoft, you have the ability to do cybersecurity audits, review, I should say. And that can be at no charge. After you speak with the coach and the client, there's some criteria around that because of Microsoft's interest and support. And so this is an incredibly valuable service, correct?
Absolutely, yes, incredible. But if I was to, the service to charge for this, we run probably between $5,000 and $10,000 to do a quick one. It can go all the way up to 20, 25, but it will be probably close to $10,000 an assessment like this, and we can deliver that at no cost, potentially. And finally, I'll leave this with you, Keith. In fact, I meant to send it earlier, but I sent you, I think today, or yesterday even, I don't remember now. But I sent you the link to this that you can provide your coach with. This is a quick a cybersecurity training that you coach can offer to your clients. Basically, there are about 20 videos of basic understanding of cybersecurity that they can give to their employees at no cost to them either, right? No cost to you, no cost to them. We just need to sign them up, and each video is about 1.5 minutes long, and it's funny. It's like it has that doodle, you know, if you have seen the doodle drawing on the whiteboard thing, and it's a 1.5 minutes, and each video has a theme like, what is phishing attack, right? How do I protect my password? You know, is online shop safe? You know, and why is my company, you know, asking me to do certain things? It's 20 videos, easy to consume, 20 minutes, and at the end of the 20 videos, the users get a certificate, right? And your client, when you assign it to your client, he can see in his organization who watched the videos, who didn't, who completed it, who didn't complete, and that just helps. You know, and Sarah, back to that point that we were making before of educating people, so they are a little bit perhaps more forgiven, if you will, right? Or at least more, or tolerate better, right? Certain things that even though may be inconvenient, but at least they understand, oh, this inconvenience is for my own sake, right? It's for my own protection. And often these videos helps with that awareness, right? Verified and trust two-factor authentication. Sometimes we'll force two-factor authentication on the user, right? Not only on the administrator, but then it's inconvenient. But then how do we help him understand? Gift card scams, you know, there's a number of videos there that will help them. And this is free. 20 of these videos are free and provides a certification for you. And I'll send these links where, you know, you can sign up for, can request the cybersecurity assessment and the free employee training.
Hiram, thank you so much. So everyone listen in. We learned about some of the aspects of the risk of cybersecurity, the process to get started and where to be looking. And then we talked about not only the tangible, intangible, but also the insurance, the risk management, as well as we're ending with the educational component, increasing the literacy of your workforce to be vigilant and to be able to recognize cybersecurity. Hiram, thanks so much for joining us as one of our faculty members.
Yes.
And we will work on getting part 2 scheduled as we look out into the spring. So thanks for joining us, everybody.
Thanks, Hiram.